Welcome to Messy Disciples. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Pastor Bob. This is Gio. And we're excited for you to be a part of the conversation. And that's what these are. These are just conversations that started because Zoom became a way of life. And we thought what we were talking about might be something that could help people along the way.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Messy Disciples. Thanks so much for all of your support. We are really geeked that this is catching on and that it's affecting people in a positive way. What do you think, Pastor Bob?
I just think it's a lot of fun, and I'm really grateful that it can provide people an opportunity to see a couple of guys just talking regular about deep stuff.
Yeah, it's been a great project to work on so far. So how today's topic came all about was it came out of nowhere. I do a ton of reading, as I'm sure Pastor Bob does more than me. I do a ton of reading, and lots of things kind of just pop out of the woodwork, and something popped into my purview this week, and it got me thinking. So Pastor Bob and I wanted to put a video out about it in advance of Halloween. And so you just sent them over, right?
I did.
So it didn't come through yet. That's okay. You can read them. You could read one off. But I had seen an article that was talking about Halloween and how it's viewed in the Bible. The practice of Halloween, a little bit separated from how it's culturally practiced, like in a society sense. But how does the Bible actually view what the day of Halloween and All Hallows Eve and All Saints Day, which is essentially what that is, right? All Saints Day. What does the Bible say about all of this? I mean, for me, the way I viewed it, I was like, wow, this seems real pagan. It seems like, we're glorifying the underworld. And it seems like more and more of the popular social culture is going towards, it's evil kind of stuff. And it's popped up and it's all around, and you drive down and it's really become commercialized. I mean, there's a guy down the street from me, just as an example, and I'm not poo-pooing because it is kind of fun to look at, but he has completely decked out the front of his house the way that you would deck out for Christmas. And it's all sorts of like evil stuff, like it's a recreation of a graveyard and it's this, that, and the other. And I mean, again, everybody that's watched this and that knows me knows that I am, not the most well-versed in the scripture, which is why I so much love talking to you, Pastor Bob, because you are ensconced in the scripture, and you've taught me personally, as well as all the people that I know that when we talk about you behind your back, say that you've also changed their lives in that way of being able to really, bring things full circle here. So I wanted to throw that topic out at you. Can you, tell us a little bit about this whole thing that's about to happen? Our kids are doing this. It's a big hoopoo about this. And, I know it's gotten off the context of this, but, take us down this path here, which I'm sure extends to the afterlife and the way that the Bible views death. Because on the flip side of everything, Pastor Bob, you also have the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, which is a similar concept where they honor the people of the past, their ancestors. But I don't really get the feeling that Halloween is that. And so I'm really bouncing back and forth. I've always had a trouble with this topic for me and my kids too. Like I get the whole idea, and I was part of that when I was young, as we all were dressing up and getting ready to go out and, go get candy. And, they've kind of diverted, Hallmark has kind of diverted, as so many things do get diverted off of what is actually, the reason for it. And the history of that video I sent you last year that we made on the history of Christmas, which I think is a fantastic video for people to educate themselves on too. I kind of got started thinking, is any of that applicable here? So I'm going to hand this over to you.
Yeah, no worries. I think that there's two, maybe three things going on when it comes to the Bible's response to Halloween. I think the first thing that's going on is there was a time in Christian history when people were trying to reconcile kind of the normal way of living and celebrating with their Christian faith. And so, for instance, some of the earlier celebrations of, you said Dia de la Muerta, and then you have the Celtic festivals of like Samhain, and the Roman festivals of honoring the dead that you have like in the first century, so like around 43. There seems to be pervasive in the majority of cultures apart from Christianity, this idea that when spring and summer is gone, and when the earth gets cold and the trees start dying, and we're about to go into a very dark period, that people just naturally start to think about death more, and they start to think about their mortality, and they start to think about the afterlife. And ways that different cultures dealt with that is they would have different festivals to honor the dead, to remember the dead. So like they would set a table for the dead. They would set a bowl with treats for the dead. The Celts would do a big bonfire, and they would actually even like dress up to try and scare ghosts, with this whole notion that ghosts don't know that they're ghosts. And so they dress up in frightening ways to scare them away, because in fact they were scared of ghosts. Yeah, isn't that interesting? In the Roman culture, what they would do is they would, upon the death of a person, they would put a plaster or waxed mold over their face. And then on the day that they honored the dead, they would light a little candle behind it. And they would have it like in a display in these niches in their walls. And it was a way of saying that the dead are still living among us. You know, our ancestors, like ancestor worship, our ancestors are still speaking to us. And that's kind of like the jack-o'-lantern idea. So we have like this really big hodgepodge of practices that happen. And the really strange thing is that it was all just kind of our way of trying to deal with the reality of death and big questions about the afterlife. And so the church, finally around the 8th century, the church decided to respond to this. This was Pope Gregory III. He said, hey, everybody's got all these festivals and, you know, honoring of the dead. And he just says, well, we're just going to create a Christian holiday where we're going to talk about those who have gone before us and are in heaven. And so that became the Christian way of saying, listen, we can have that conversation about the afterlife, and we can talk about death and the reality of it, but we're going to frame that inside of the church's story. And they picked a date on the calendar, November 1st. And November 1st, they called All Saints' Day. Well, the day before All Saints' Day Eve, in the old Saxon, Celtic, you know, Proto-English kind of language, was All Hallows Mass or All Hallows Messa or All Hallows Eve. And so that's where you get Halloween from. And so what ended up happening is people didn't want to replace their festivals that they'd been doing forever, you know, the big bonfires and dressing up and setting out feasts and all that. They didn't want to replace that. So what they ended up doing is they ended up just doing like a fusion, like fish tacos.
They merged.
Yeah, yeah. It is the fish tacos. And so here's what you did. You had your pagan stuff on the 31st and you had your Christian stuff on the 1st, you know. And so, yeah, does that make sense?
It does, and it's really piqued my interest that just now you ended it by saying they'll do their pagan stuff before their Christian stuff. So that really got me. I mean, you said it naturally, yeah. So I mean, is there something to that?
Yeah, there's definitely something to that, and I think people do this all the time, not in such a structured, formal way. But for instance, I don't know how many times in other congregations, not in Las Vegas, but in other congregations, where I was asked to hurry the sermon up or hurry the service up because they wanted to catch the football game. You know, so they had kind of like their non-church priorities that they wanted to celebrate that day, but they also knew church was important, and so I think there's this tendency in us to, you know, we want to honor our faith and our values, but at the same time, could you hurry up because the Packers are about to be on? You know what I mean? And so we have a way of fish tacoing our faith kind of a lot, you know. And so I think it's just a kind of a natural thing that we do. And so I think,
I don't mean to cut you off, but that's an interesting point that you just said. You're like, it's a natural thing for us to do. And one of the things that I've been learning through these conversations is that humans are really not, oops, oh my gosh.
Ooh.
What is that? Sorry.
Oh, that's good.
I'll have to cut that there.
Okay.
And then, sorry. lost my train of thought. Oh, humans are just not that interesting, right? So no, we're not real clever. We're not real. I mean, we can't figure out basic stuff like how to be kind to each other, right? I mean, when it really comes down to it, we're not doing that great as a species, right? We're predisposed to. We talked about this in some of our other videos. So if anybody's interested in seeing more on this topic, I forget which video it is. Go watch them all. They're great. But we touch upon this, and right, we do though. How and that is the whole concept, right, behind the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit being there is the conscience for us to be able to, allow us to tap into that energy when we're asking for it. I notice when I pray at night lately, I've been praying, I've been asking the Lord to be with me in these times during the day that I get challenged, right? Like you're watching the debate last night and you're so frustrated because it's a I think they called it a food fight, one of the articles that I wrote. And you're sitting there as a person like, well, how do I even feel about this? And we're watching the human nature of destroying each other, destroying ourselves in the process, and destroying each other. So, I bounce it back to you in that vein of the pagan coming first. There's something to that, then, huh?
Yeah, there definitely is, and I think that when Halloween came to America, I think that we were very aware of the difference between the pagan and the Christian. And so we tried really hard in the 1920s and 30s, because when Halloween came over to America, it came over as All Saints Day, but we were British, by our colonialization. And so the Celtic festivals came over, the soul cakes came over. Soul cakes was like a thing in England where the poor people would beg for the rich people to give them a cake, a sweet treat, and they would ask them to pray for the souls of their dead loved ones. And so we came over with all this like British baggage, right? And then the Italians came over and they had the visiting of the graveyards, which was weird. In the American Southwest, you had the Spanish traditions that became local or native and Mexican customs and stuff like this, right?
You just blew my mind there. Soul cakes is the birthplace of trick-or-treating.
Yeah, it is.
You said it a little fast, so if you don't mind, can you go back, rewind that real quick and give me a recap of exactly what soul cakes was, because that sounds to me not only, and it's also interesting because as I'm listening to you here, I'm thinking how American, right? Which is a good thing. It's a good thing though for us to, even back in the day, look how we did it. We realized that we were all from different places, and then we found common ground, and then soul cakes. Go ahead.
So in England, they would have a parade for All Saints Day. And during the parade, poor people would beg for food, and wealthy families would give out something called soul cakes in return for their promise to pray for the souls of the dearly departed.
So the wealthy people were handing cakes out and asking the poor people to pray for the wealthy people's descendants, or the other way around?
Sorry. Other way around. So the wealthy people are handing out the cakes, and the poor people would say, "Would you pray for my dead relative?"
So they take the cake and then ask for more.
Yeah. That's right.
I just want to make sure I understand a soul cake.
Well, yeah, and so this was their way of kind of celebrating All Saints Day, but also trying to honor it. But also the charity aspect is where treats come in, right? And so if you mix soul cakes, the giving of treats and the asking for favors, if you mix that together with the Celtic practice of dressing up to scare away the big nasty ghosts,
you got Halloween.
You get Halloween. Now, where the trick or treat came in is more of an American phenomenon. What they noticed in the 1920s and 30s is that a lot of All Saints Day celebrations and festivals turned into opportunities for vandalism, and so it was really bad.
And so the first time we've seen that, have we?
That is exactly correct.
Propensity towards that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and so that's very well said. In the 20s and 30s, they wanted to make it a more community-centered. They wanted to reduce the vandalism aspect. But it really wasn't until the 1950s, when you have the baby boomers, right, where there's a ton of kids around, that they said, we've got to stop vandalism and we've got to make this a family-centered activity. So America's response was to take out the pagan, take out the religious as well, and to just make it a community kind of event where families are getting together. And what they thought was in the 1950s is that having candy out and celebrating with people and dressing up, what they thought was this is a really low-cost holiday. And so it was really appealing to families. You know, you set a bowl of candy out, you dress up a little bit, but they tried to like take the teeth out of the paganism and even some of the religious festivals, which seems strange to people, right? So, you know, religious parades, which you see, for instance, in the American Southwest and also in places like New York and Chicago, where you have heavy Italian populations. Religious parades just seem weird, you know, to the rest of middle America, your Norwegians and, you know, kind of stuff like that. So they tried to make it a more of a ubiquitous holiday, and they made it family-centered and family-focused, which means the All Saints Day celebrations became something that was, if you're going to do All Saints, it was strictly at church. It was, if you're doing All Saints, it's only a church thing. Everything else was a community event. It wasn't until the Halloween movie franchise lifted off that all the scary and satanic came back in. And you and I know these movies, you know, maybe some of the listeners don't know these movies, but, you know, you have like John Carpenter, you know, he came out with all of his Halloween movies, Jamie Lee Curtis, all the scary movies came out during that time. It was only recently that I started to notice that scary movies came back seasonally now. And that's in like shows like American Horror Story, which only comes out during Halloween. And then the Stranger Things franchise, which is like a riff off of 1980s life. It's like the Goldbergs for scary movies. The Stranger Things franchise only at first came out during Halloween. And so that's how scary got back into Halloween. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And it leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So how do we celebrate Halloween as Christians? I've heard,
yeah.
you know, I've heard now from this, you know, very excellent and well-described history, short history. You did an amazing job of going down a very long road in a really short period of time just now. That was cool. So, you know, we have this kind of framework of the you know, the history of Halloween, and you're actually also you're close to getting me to kind of change the way I feel about it right now, because to know that there originally was an aspect of it that was not this, you know, common thread that seems to be pervasive now in you know, all conversations or all things Halloween. I like the fact that there was, you know, so many different things involved in it. You had charity, you had you know, the celebration of the ancestors, which I think is the key. And so give us some ideas, you know, if I'm going to try to make some reality out of this for my kids, let's say, and you know, try to get them to understand in the most simplistic way, you know, what are we really doing on this holiday, and why do we take the time to stop what we're doing and have any kind of a celebration? Give me some ideas of what that might be, because it sounds like Christmas Eve, where you wake up the next day on All Saints Day and you go to church to go and pray for your ancestors. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay, that's very good. So I'll tell you what our family does, and then you can leave comments below after you click the subscribe button and tell me that all my traditions are dumb, which is okay. But I'll tell you what our family does. On All Saints Eve, we take out the photo album. And what we do is we go through the photo album and we show our kids our relatives. And it really is kind of fun, because your kids never think of you as a child, and they never think of their grandparents or their aunts and uncles as children. And they don't know who these relatives are. So we tell the stories of our family, and it never gets old. I mean, the photo album rarely changes. It only updates, right? But it tells them their family's story, and they can ask, is this person alive or did they die? Well, what kind of person were they? And that becomes our way on October 31st of talking about family, so that when we go to church on All Saints Day, November 1st, typically churches will have some kind of remembrance, some kind of memorial. So I've served at a congregation that used to put little votive tea lights on the baptismal font. And they would put one candle for each of the persons that died that year, within that year, in the congregation. And then during the prayers, they would name off all of the people who died and went to heaven as a way to kind of stop right in the middle of that worship service and say, and those people are now in heaven. So our kids went through the photo album, and then they come to church and they realize heaven got bigger and those were somebody else's relatives. It really helps them to realize that the goal of life is not to just live in the physical kind of reality of earth, but our destination is heaven. And it also really helps out a lot that usually right around this time of year is the Festival of the Booths from the Old Testament.
Of the what?
Of the booths, Booths, booth.
Got it.
Like a voting booth, but it has nothing to do with voting. In the Old Testament, it's called Succoth or Succoth. And what it is it's a festival where you pop a tent and you have a lot of lights around and you do a lot of family things and you remember your wanderings on earth. So the Israelites wandered for 40 years before they went in the promised land, and Sukkoth is where they remember that. And so for us, having All Saints Day near Sukkoth helps us to think about just family and this long journey that this whole family is on. And so, I mean, think about it. When was the last time you had a conversation with your kids about your relatives, both living and those who have passed away?
I like the idea of living and dead. What I was thinking of while you were telling me is we actually do something like this in our family already. But we never tied it because I didn't know the history. I didn't know the historical and biblical tie to it. So we would do it on birthdays. It was one of our birthday kind of rituals that we did too. But I like the idea of tying it in and maybe doing it at a given time where it's more of our family getting together and telling these stories over and over. It's a very important. And how do you spell Succoth?
Sukkkoth, or sometimes spelled with C's. Succoth.
I've seen it with the C's. And how do you pronounce it?
Succoth.
Succoth. Interesting.
Can I share one story that I think is really profound and that helps me
Please.
to think about All Saints Day?
Please, yeah.
I had this lady in our congregation named Hazel Borsvold, and she had a husband who preceded my knowing her in death. His name was Woody. And it was actually kind of funny. When I went to visit her one time, I brought my daughter Emma, and she had this little Woody doll from the Toy Story. And my daughter actually stole it from her house. It was hilarious. Not maliciously. She just thought, here's a toy. I'm going to take it. And I had to return it. And that's when I found out that her deceased husband's name was Woody, and that she had it in honor of her husband, and then my daughter stole it. So it was really hilarious. And so towards the end of Hazel's life, she was sick a lot, and she was in the hospital a lot. And so it was the week before she died, and I went to go visit her in the hospital. And as I went to visit her, and she's just got this candor about her. She's just incredible. This kind of no nonsense kind of talk. Well, when I was visiting her in the hospital, she leaned in because she was afraid that the person in the bed next to her, or a nurse or something, might hear. She leaned in and she says, "Pastor Bob, I think my friends think I'm crazy." And I leaned in and I raised my eyebrow and I said, "Well, Hazel, let's see if you are." And she said, "Well, I'll tell you what's going on." She says, "My friends think I'm crazy because I keep talking to Woody, her deceased husband." And she says, "Well, I find myself talking to him. And my friends say that maybe that makes me crazy." And I said to her, I said, "Oh, Hazel, that doesn't make you crazy at all." She goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, when Woody was here with you, did you ever talk to him like from one room to the next? And she says, "Yeah, I sure did." I was like, "Probably when you were yelling at him?" And she says, "Yeah, when I was yelling at him." And I said, "Well, I think what you're doing now is kind of like the same thing. I said, because Woody's not gone. He's not lost. He's not annihilated. Woody is in heaven. And what is heaven but other than being the next room over? See, Woody's in the next room, and you're not there yet. And so you're talking to him in the next room. I said, now, Hazel, if he starts talking back, I want you to get a CAT scan. I said, but Woody's not gone. I said, it's not crazy for you to know that he's still alive in Jesus, and that you want to talk to him. I said, that's not crazy at all. You're acknowledging, I said, something that we say every single Sunday in the Apostles' Creed, which is, I believe in the communion of saints. I said, Woody's still alive. He's in heaven. I said, so you keep talking to him. I said, but do let me know if he starts talking back.
It's, I like the communion of saints reference.
Yeah. I think that's what All Saints Day is. I think it's this awareness and it's this reality that our loved ones are not annihilated and they're not totally separated from us in that they've been lost somehow. But it's this awareness that there are those who we love who have gone before us, and they're still alive, and they're still real, and they're still a part of the church even. And All Saints Day helps us to realize that there are some of those who got on the bus before we did, but we're going to catch up with them one day. And it can be sobering and gentle and mindful for us. And it can be nice for our kids too, because our kids sometimes get scared about the reality of heaven. And sometimes our kids hear a lot about heaven. They hear a lot about it. They hear how good it is, how amazing it is, and how perfect it is, and how there's no more pain there. And sometimes our kids might say, well, then I want to go to heaven. And then you're really worried. As a parent, you're like, oh, that just got real. No, honey, you're not supposed to go to heaven right now. Then they go, why? And then they start to get offended that it's not fair, because if heaven is perfect, we should all just die. And you go, okay, blah, 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 blah. And say, here's what I want you to know. We're all going to go there, but it's just not our turn yet. It's just not our turn yet. See, we're waiting to go. It's like we're waiting in a big line.
Sure sounds like purgatory to me. Hey, that was a grab.
Not that
at all. Anybody that knows me from the other videos gets that joke, but no, that wasn't a jab at all.
Yeah.
On this side of the video, I get where you are.
Yeah.
You got to go whack. You're so funny.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we'd love to continue this conversation, especially Pastor Bob. He was just recounting how much he's been enjoying everybody stopping him and referring to something that we've talked about in these videos here. So feel free to hit either of us with more about this topic. And earlier, Pastor Bob told a story about what his family traditions are. We would both love to hear what you guys' family traditions are. Put them in the comments below, and we'll read through them, and we might address them if they're something that we can address. But thank you all. Pastor Bob, you got anything you want to sign off with?
Have fun and Halloween, stay safe, and you don't have to be scary to be celebrating it. Just be safe with your families and just remember the communion of saints.
Awesome.
Thanks for watching today. It's been a great conversation. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation, so go ahead and click subscribe. And if you hit the notification bar, it'll let you know when new videos are coming out, which is really important because all of our videos are about new and current events that are happening. If you have any questions, go ahead and contact me via email. It's great to have you a part of the conversation. Thanks for joining us. Bye.